Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, the Sweet 16 is upon us. March Madness 2023 is in full swing, and I'm going to go over every single Sweet 16 game. And I'm going to give my preview and prediction for every single Sweet 16 game. Now, you look at the first matchup between the Michigan State Spartans and the Kansas State Wildcats. This should be a really good game. You have the 7th seed Michigan State Spartans, who have had a really solid season overall. Tom Izzo, he's a Hall of Fame coach. He is fantastic, and he's done a great job with the Michigan State roster this season because he doesn't have his deepest team that he's ever had, and he probably doesn't have one of his more talented teams either. But still, Michigan State, they got a 7th seed in the tournament, and they got a huge win over the Marquette Golden Eagles, who were the number 2 seed in the round of 32. That was a big upset for Michigan State and Tom Izzo to get the win over Shaka Smart and Marquette. And Joey Hauser, he's had a fantastic season for Michigan State, the transfer from Marquette, who was able to beat his former team. And you also look at players like Malik Hall and Tyson Walker. He's a fantastic point guard, Tyson Walker is, for Michigan State. And A.J. Hoggard as well. Michigan State just has a really solid team. But Kansas State, they've had a fantastic season in their own right. They are a 3 seed in this year's tournament. Jerome Tang in his first season as the Kansas State head coach with Keontae Johnson, the Florida transfer, who collapsed on the floor a couple of years ago. He's one of the best stories in college basketball. It's so nice to see him playing basketball at such a high level. And you also have Marquise Noel. He's a fantastic 5'8" point guard for Kansas State, who lit up Kentucky in the round of 32, hitting a lot of big shots in the second half. And if he hits a lot of big shots in this game, I think Kansas State has a really good chance to win. And you also have Naquan Tomlin down low. He's a really good center, but Matty Sissoko for Michigan State should be able to slow down Naquan Tomlin a good bit in the post. But Michigan State's a really good defensive team. They held Marquette to 60 points, and I think that even though Kansas State's a really good offensive team, I think Michigan State's going to be really physical with Kansas State, and I'm actually going to go with Michigan State to pull off another upset and beat the Kansas State Wildcats 73-69. I think Tom Izzo's going to find a way to get it done and move his Michigan State Spartans to the Elite Eight. Now on to the next game, you have the Arkansas Razorbacks playing the UConn Huskies. Now, this is a really good game as well. All of these games are fantastic, especially once you get to the Sweet 16. But this game has a lot of intrigue because Arkansas, the 8th seed, knocked off the 1 seed Kansas Jayhawks 73-72 in the round of 32. One of the best games of March Madness so far. And Arkansas is just such a talented team. You have Nick Smith Jr. and Anthony Black, 2 guards that are going to be drafted in the top 15 of this year's NBA draft. They're both really good players for Arkansas. And you also have Mikel Mitchell down low for the Razorbacks. And you have Ricky Council IV, the Wichita State transfer, and Devo Davis, both really solid players for Arkansas that are both really good at getting buckets whenever the Razorbacks need a big shot. And Eric Musselman, he's a great head coach. He's done great things at the Nevada Wolfpack and now at the Arkansas Razorbacks. And he's had so much experience as an NBA head coach as well. I think Eric Musselman is one of the best head coaches in college basketball, and he has a great team on both sides of the ball. And you look at UConn, Dan Hurley, he's done a really great job with the 4 seed UConn Huskies this year. Even though they started out the year 14-0, they had a big rough patch in the middle of Big East play, but they started to play much better down the stretch of the season. And UConn has Adama Sanogo, one of those underrated big men in the country. He doesn't get talked about as much as some of the other bigs in college basketball, but he's had a great season, and he's been lighting it up so far in March Madness. When UConn got their big wins over St. Mary's and Iona so far in the tournament, Adama Sanogo scored over 25 points in both games. He's playing fantastic basketball. Donovan Klingman is a matchup nightmare for Arkansas to have to stop because he's 7'2" and he comes off the bench for UConn. And UConn also has Jordan Hawkins and Tristan Newton and Naheem Aline and just so many other great players overall. And I think that the depth for UConn is going to be really difficult for Arkansas to stop. I think the Razorbacks have the talent to get the job done, but I'm going to go with the UConn Huskies to beat the Arkansas Razorbacks 74-70, and UConn will be going on to the Elite Eight. Now, in the next game, you have the Tennessee Volunteers playing the Florida Atlantic Owls. Now, this is really interesting because Florida Atlantic is a non-seed. Even though they're from Conference USA, they only have 3 losses this year, and they're a team that just knows how to win. And you look at Dusty May, he's a fantastic head coach. He's probably going to be getting a Power 5 head coaching job really soon, and he's done a great job with the Owls all year long. They have a team that is really good on defense and really good on offense, and they were able to beat Fairleigh Dickinson and Memphis in the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. But you look at Tennessee, it's Rick Barnes, and I know that a lot of people don't believe in Rick Barnes because of the fact that he has not had a lot of success in the NCAA tournament, but the Volunteers just got a huge win over the Duke Blue Devils because of their defense. Tennessee was great on the defense side of the ball. Santiago Vescovi is a really good shooting guard who's been knocking down threes at a high rate toward the end of the season, and Olivier Nakuma had a fantastic game against Duke, scoring 27 points. I think that Tennessee's defense is going to step up again in the Sweet 16, and even though Florida Atlantic is a really good offensive team, I think Tennessee will be able to slow them down, and I think the Volunteers will have enough offense to find a way to get this win. I'm going to go with the Tennessee Volunteers to beat the Florida Atlantic Owls in a close, low-scoring game, 64-61, and the Volunteers will be moving on to the Elite Eight. Now, on to the next game, you have the Gonzaga Bulldogs and the UCLA Bruins. This is a fantastic West Coast matchup, has a lot of intrigue, and I think this could be one of the best Sweet 16 games. You look at Gonzaga, they got a huge win over TCU in the round of 32. And Drew Timme's playing some of the best basketball of his career. He's starting to hit threes every now and then, and he's just great on the block. And overall, Drew Timme's going to be a matchup problem for UCLA, especially if Adem Bona is not able to play for the Bruins. He's a game-time decision. And you look overall at Gonzaga's roster, it's not just Drew Timme. Julian Strother's playing better basketball down the stretch of this season. He's a really good forward who's probably going to be in the NBA after the season. Rasir Bolton's been playing better at the guard position. Anton Watson's a solid forward. And I think overall, Gonzaga's guards have not been great this season, but they have been improving as the season's gone along, and it's still marked few. He's gotten Gonzaga to 8 straight Sweet 16s, and he's gotten them farther than that most years as well. I think Gonzaga's a great team. And you look over on the UCLA side, Mick Cronin is a fantastic head coach. He was great at Cincinnati. He's been great at UCLA as well, and UCLA won the Pac-12 regular season title. They were not able to beat Arizona in the Pac-12 championship game, but they have a great team. But injuries are going to be an issue for UCLA. Jalen Clark's out for the season. That's a really tough loss. He was a really great defensive player for UCLA. Adem Bona's banged up. He played a little bit for UCLA against Northwestern in the round of 32, but if he's not healthy, that could be an issue, especially with Drew Timme lurking for Gonzaga. And David Singleton's banged up for UCLA as well. You still have Jaime Jaquez, you still have Tiger Campbell, and you still have Amari Bailey. And I think UCLA still has enough firepower to get the job done. I think this should be a high-level basketball game, but I'm going to go with the Gonzaga Bulldogs to beat the UCLA Bruins 77-73 for the Bulldogs to move on to the Elite Eight. I just think Gonzaga might have a little too much firepower for the shorthanded UCLA Bruins. Now on to the next game. You have the San Diego State Aztecs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. This is a game that on paper, you look at the way Alabama's playing, a lot of people will probably think the Crimson Tide will just steamroll over the Aztecs, but San Diego State is a great team. Matt Bradley's a great guard, and you look overall at San Diego State's roster, they just have great players up and down the board. They're really good on defense. They play fundamental basketball, and they played in a tough and rugged Mountain West Conference this season, and they won the conference. And I think overall, Brian Dutcher's one of the most underrated head coaches in college basketball. He consistently has his team as one of the better teams in college basketball, constantly ranked in the top 25. And I think San Diego State's going to do everything they possibly can to get this win. But Alabama, you have Nate Oates at head coach. He's a great head coach. You have Brandon Miller, who's playing some of the best basketball of any freshman in college basketball in recent memory. And overall, I think that even though he's a little bit banged up, he's still playing great basketball, and he played really well against the Maryland Terrapins in the second round, suggesting he is starting to get healthy. And Alabama is just such a deep basketball team. You've got Charles Bediako. You've got Javon Quinterly, who's getting healthier as the season's gone along, and he's been playing really well. You've got Mark Sears, the Ohio transfer. Overall, Alabama just has great players all across the board. I think they're going to be too deep for the San Diego State Aztecs, and as long as Alabama knocks down a few threes, they should be moving on to the Elite Eight. And I'm going to go with the Alabama Crimson Tide to beat the San Diego State Aztecs 78-67. I think the Aztecs will give it everything they've got, but I think Alabama will be too much for them. Now, on to the next game, you have the Miami Hurricane playing the Houston Cougars. This is a really good matchup. Miami's a very good basketball team out of the ACC this season. I think you look at Miami's roster, they're really guard-oriented. You've got Isaiah Wong, you've got Nigel Pack, and a plethora of guards that are really solid and play great basketball. And Norchad Omier, he is an undersized center, but he's a Mack truck down low. He gets rebounds, and he just plays tough basketball all around. And Jim Larinaga, a really underrated head coach in college basketball. He's done a great job with Miami the past few seasons, and they've been playing better basketball, especially now that they've moved to a more guard-oriented attack. And I think that Miami showed what they can be as a basketball team. When they beat Indiana in the round of 32, they had a lot of success shooting a lot of threes, and they played really solid, scrappy basketball. But you also look at Miami when they're not playing as well. When they barely beat Drake in the first round, they did get that win, but Miami was not hitting their shots, and they were really struggling on both sides of the ball, even though they did get that win. So for Miami, if they play like they did against Indiana, they'll have a really good chance to win against Houston. But Houston's a great defensive team. Kelvin Sampson has a team that really believes on the defensive side of the ball. Jarris Walker is a legitimate top 10 NBA draft pick. He's a fantastic forward. He's such a big body, and I don't think that Miami's going to have a player that's going to be able to slow him down, because they are one of the smaller teams in the NCAA tournament. And you also look at Houston. Marcus Sasser's been banged up, but if he's able to play, that'll be huge for Houston. But if not, Houston still has a lot of other good guards like Jamal Shead and Tremont Mark, who are also really solid players. I think this will be a fantastic game, especially if Miami's hitting shots. I think they'll have a good chance to win. But I'm going to go with the Houston Cougars to beat the Miami Hurricanes 72-69. I think Miami might not be hitting as many shots in this game against Houston's tough defense, and I think the Houston Cougars will find a way to move on to the Elite Eight. Now on to the next game, you have the Princeton Tigers playing the Creighton Blue Jays. Now this is a really interesting matchup that not a lot of people were expecting to happen. Princeton's a 15 seed out of the Ivy League, but Princeton deserves to be where they're at. They're playing great basketball. They beat the Missouri Tigers in the second round, and they beat the Arizona Wildcats in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Princeton's playing fantastic. They're a smart basketball team. They have high IQ players, obviously being from the Ivy League, and I think overall Princeton has a really good chance to maybe spoil Creighton's party if they can play great basketball on the offensive and defensive end like they've done so far in the NCAA tournament. But Creighton's a really good basketball team. Greg McDermott's a great head coach. Creighton's a deep basketball team, and overall you look at their starting five. They have Arthur Kaluma at the 4 spot. He's a really good forward. He can drive into the paint, and he can hit threes every now and then. Ryan Kalkbrenner's a great center. He's one of the best 7-footers in college basketball. And you look at Trey Alexander and Ryan Nimhard and even Baylor Shireman at the 1 through 3 spots. They're all great players. I just think that Creighton has a really deep team. They don't get a lot of contributions from their bench, but what makes Creighton a deep team is because every single player in their starting five is a great scorer and is a great contributor on the offensive and defensive end. Creighton does not foul that much, and they play really fundamental basketball as well. I think Princeton's going to have a really good game this one. I think they're going to give it everything they've got, but I think Creighton's going to have too much firepower at the end of the day, and I'm going to go with the Creighton Blue Jays to beat the Princeton Tigers and end their Cinderella run 74-64 in the Sweet 16 to move on to the Elite Eight for the Blue Jays. And on to the last game of the Sweet 16. All these games should be awesome, but to wrap up on Friday night is the Xavier Musketeers and the Texas Longhorns. This game has the makings to be a classic. Xavier is a great offensive basketball team. Sean Miller's back in Cincinnati coaching the Musketeers. He's done a great job in his first season as the head coach. He's completely reinvented the offense for this basketball team, because last year Xavier had most of the same players, but they were nowhere near as good. And Sean Miller only added Sule Boom from UTEP in the transfer portal. He's been fantastic at the guard position for Xavier. And you also have Jack Nungy, the Iowa transfer. He's been really solid as well. Xavier is missing Zach Freemantle to injury. He has not returned, and I don't think he will be able to return in this game either, which is a tough loss. But Jerome Hunter, the Indiana transfer, is playing some of the best basketball that he's ever played for Xavier. And Xavier also has Adam Kunkel and Colby Jones. And overall, Xavier's kind of like Creighton. They just have a really deep basketball team. It's great on the offensive end, but Xavier does struggle on defense. Sometimes they aren't a great defensive team. They have gotten better toward the end of the season on defense, but they're still a much better offensive team, and that's where it could be a problem against the Texas Longhorns, because Texas is a great offensive team. You look at their roster: Marcus Carr, Timmy Allen, Serge Jabari Rice, Tyrese Hunter, Dylan Dessou. The list goes on and on for Texas. They just have great basketball players all over their roster, and interim head coach Rodney Terry's done a fantastic job keeping the team together after the dismissal of Chris Beard. And I just think if you look at Texas, if they're making their threes, they're one of the best teams in college basketball. And even when they're not hitting their threes, their guards are capable of driving in the paint. They're a really good team on the glass. They get a lot of rebounds. And I just think overall, you look at Texas, if they play a really good offensive game, they'll have a great chance to move on to the Elite Eight, because Xavier's not the best defensive team. I think this is going to be a really high-scoring game. I think both teams are going to be making a lot of big shots in this one. And I think this is going to be one of the closest games in the Sweet 16. But I'm going to go with the Texas Longhorns to beat the Xavier Musketeers 81-78 in the Sweet 16 to move on to the Elite Eight. I think they're going to hit enough big shots down the stretch, and they're going to find a way to move past the Xavier Musketeers. Now that's my preview and prediction of the Sweet 16 of the 2023 March Madness season. I think all these games are going to be fantastic, and obviously a lot of the other teams will have a really good chance to win. You never know. But I have Michigan State, UConn, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Alabama, Houston, Creighton, and Texas all moving on to the Elite Eight, but it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the Sweet 16 and looking forward to how many of the games I actually predict right. It should be a lot of fun. I'm sure a lot of these games aren't going to go the way that a lot of people are expecting, but it should be a lot of fun, and that is definitely what March Madness is all about. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below which teams you think will win the Sweet 16 games and what you think about my picks and whether you think there's going to be a lot of upsets or you think the games are going to go as a lot of people expect. Follow me on Twitter as well, and I will see you next time.